In today's video, we're gonna rear end convert our Ninebot Gokart Pro. We're gonna show you how much, and ultimately, will it work? Let's find out. So as you guys know, we've done the front wheel conversion on this thing. The video will be linked right here if you have not checked that out. We also have done a lot of driving videos on this go-kart that I'd highly recommend checking out as well. But now we're going to be focusing on the rear wheel. Of course, first step is to take it off, which you have these Allen screws, 6 of them, and the plate comes off and the wheel comes off right there. I took off the side plastics, which is not necessary, but it just kind of leaves more room and accessibility when working in this area because the plastic comes down in front of the wheel. Now when you are doing this conversion, you will eventually have to either cut them or not run them in order to fit the rear wheels. Eventually we will cut the plastics to fit. Right now we want to focus on making the rear wheels fit and making sure that we have the clearance from the frame itself before we jump into further modifications. For this installation, these are going to be the rear wheels that I'm going to be running on the go-kart. They're definitely pretty big. We have a 11 by 7.5 by 5, so a pretty wide tire. Should add a lot of grip and look really cool on our Ninebot. As you guys can tell, we have the first wheel mocked up. I wore this thing down so much that these little pieces started to show. You have the little holes, and they were the ends of the holes. So I decided to cut them all up, and this is what we're left with. The reason I have this on here still is so that if any of the hardware breaks, we have a cushion between the motor and the ground. So you have your Ninebot plate, which is essentially the wheel cover for this rubber. Now, in order to fit these bolts under the cover, you have to add spacers between the motor and this plate. So you want to get extended bolts. You can see these are not the stock bolts. The stock bolts are black, but these are extended. I'll leave all the measurements on the screen for you guys so you guys have the measurements of all the hardware I'm using. So right here I created this little template, which is the bolt holes for our wheel here, and then I use that to trace on our plate here. But what I did was I put a piece of metal that's straight from point to point, drew lines, found the center. I used the center on this to the center on that, and I put the center of these holes on the center of the lines, and that's how I got these holes to be exactly where I need it, in center. Now the hardware is really long because these wheels are pretty, this is the back side of it, but these wheels are pretty deep, so you need the hardware to fit, to be able to reach all the way here so you can put a bolt on the other side. The reason I have all this hardware here is to create an equal clamping force on all 3 bolts so that the wheel is perfectly straight when rotating, and it leaves just enough of a gap from the rim to this plate. So I'll leave the measurements for this on the screen as well for you guys. The reason I have these little plates right here is to distribute load between from one bolt to the next. So if the wheel is sitting more on this bolt, it puts load on this so that this one is less prone to break. Instead, all the bolts are taking tension on these sleeves that I have fitted over the hardware, so the load is more evenly distributed. As for these bolts, they have, these spacers that I'll put on the screen for you guys to show you which ones I got from Home Depot. But hopefully those hold as well. I'm going to take everything off and Loctite it so that things don't come loose. I also have hardware on the inside of the sleeves so that the bolts are always in place, and that if I want, I can just take off the wheel and then undo all these bolts. So all I have left to do to fit up the other side is to cut more of these plates so that we can fit all the hardware in here, Loctite it all on the other side, get one wheel on, and then come back to this side, Loctite it, and we should be good to go. Since we have these spacers that go around the plate that's supposed to clamp the wheel, I'm not too worried about it moving, since it's just a precaution for if the wheel studs break and we need a cushion to cushion our motor when we hit the ground. But since there's no force on this isn't touching the ground, it's not a big deal that it's not being clamped perfectly by the sandwich plate right here. I'm hoping things last, but this is also a very sketchy way of doing this. There's no one else that's done it, and there's no legit method to convert the rear end of these things to go-kart tires so that we can put on PVC or have all these other options, right? So this is the method I'm going with for now, because this has reinforced design in it, which hopefully is suitable enough to hold our weight and allow us to drive on this at least for a little while before things give out. Again, I'm gonna go over all the expenses later once we get everything installed. And it is the next day. Basically, everything that I have here is what we're gonna use to mount up our wheels, or at least the hub to put on the wheel, right? So I have my cut pieces, as you guys saw in the video. Right now, I'm going to be Loctiting everything. That way it's all secure, and I'm gonna mark all the nuts and bolts to make sure that I can keep an eye on everything to make sure it's not coming loose. The first thing I'm going to be Loctiting is the extended bolts on the hub. 5/16 4-inch bolts going through the plate with a washer on this side, a washer, lock washer, and nut on this side. For all three, I'm going to tighten them down as much as I can. And then once I have these all squared away, I'm going to take these spacers, these aluminum spacers, and the bolts I have in here that also I'm going to also be using lock washers for, and then I'm going to Loctite all 6 bolts onto the hub. This will be the first thing to go on, and then all the bolts. And you want to tighten these first because it's hard to get a wrench in between there. There's not enough room. After that, we will put the spacers on and these plates, hold everything together, and then we can put the wheel on, and then we can lock down the wheel with some lock nuts. Alright, so we're at this point where we could bolt on the wheel, but we're gonna run into an issue. But now, unfortunately, the chassis is in the way. So this is actually a little too long in order to fit the wheel. So we're gonna have to cut this off, because as you can see, when I put the wheel on, we aren't able to finish putting on the wheel because it just hits. Now, because this is a mounting point, there's no point in trying to preserve this in any way. Like, there's no point in cutting it off here. And because we have weld here, I think it would only make sense to cut right here And so if we did want to weld this piece back on, which isn't the biggest structural support regardless, because we have all these other mounting points, that this really isn't that necessary. In terms of a crashing standpoint, the wheel would probably take all the hit anyway before it even gets to this point. So this would be the main part that I would not want to touch. We're going to cut it off with a cutting wheel on both sides, mount it up, and put it down for the first time. First time on the ground, first time in history. Let's hear how much it's gonna creak. Oh, bro. Not that bad. It looks sick. Also, these are not tight, so. I mean, the side pieces aren't even on yet, dude. All right. Is it on and ready to go? Or am I not driving? Whoa, be slow, be slow. Come on.
Why is it adjustable like that?
So, like for someone who's a different height can.
Did you modify that?
No, it's like that. Dude.
Somebody didn't charge this thing, right?
Dog, get down. You're ruining the thumbnail. So it seems to hold up pretty decent, which is cool. But dude, it looks sick. Come on.
We'll turn it on.
Oh, all right then.
I'm supposed to know if it's really sick.
So if you guys want to see the next video, it's going to be linked right here for you guys. We'll see you there and see how this thing finally does after all this work. Let's hope it survives.